Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh from 670 Scores, Mully and Haugh show. I'm on the score, and Adam Studzinski, our producer of the midday show, Bernstein and Holmes, joins us instead of Dan Wiederer, who's enjoying a couple days off. Dan is getting ready for the rest of the season, so he deserves the rest. I guess Buffalo took its toll on Dan. Adam, though, there's a lot to cover because we haven't spoken since the first preseason game, and this is a big week for the Bears as the Bengals get ready to practice against the Bears. Maybe to the point where they won't need the preseason game to play Joe Burrow or Caleb Williams. Let's go back to Buffalo. I think that we've heard a lot of the analysis. I think we've heard a lot of the discussion. You saw it for your own eyes. Caleb Williams, I think, passed the first test, and he looked like he belonged.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He looked really strong. And, especially, he made all the kinds of throws you want him to see make. He threw from the pocket on a third down and long. He did put one ball in danger, although they got out of it with the illegal contact. So, and then that throw he had running to his right to Cole Kmet was awesome. So he did a little bit of everything that you wanted to see from him. And now you just got to keep seeing him rise. So I think the Bengals practices this week are going to be really key to see him go against what's expected to be a good Bengals team. But then we'll see, how much he actually plays in this next game. But as far as like what you're looking for from his first preseason game, first NFL action is pretty strong.
I think that the trick after that is not getting carried away and getting, too optimistic based on how he lived up to the hype, because it was considerable. You remember 2017, Mitch Trubisky's first preseason action. I think he was 18 of 25, and he looked very good, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait for him to take the Bears to the promised land." And then Justin Fields had a promising preseason too. This is different because this is the unquestioned starter from day one. I almost think in that context, because he has known all along that this was going to be his job, it's kind of weird because the expectations are so high. And yet I think the bar for the week for the first start was maybe relatively low. I was interested in how he commanded the huddle, the little things, the operation, and he was pointing out what guys to block on third and long. He was looking like he was trying to, the practice, it sounds silly, the silly practice of covering your ears and being so he can hear his offensive coordinator, Shane Waldron, talking to him between plays is so essential. And you don't get that in practice. You don't get that when you're backing up, standing on the sidelines, watching somebody else do it. So I even think before we even get to the running on the throw and the dangerous things he does with his skill set, I think the poise and command was what almost impressed me more than anything.
Oh yeah, definitely. He looked comfortable. He looked like he belonged. And I think people bring up Mitch Trubisky's strong debut in a preseason game. Didn't he start as third string? So he went in there against third stringers and looked really good. So I think that there is a little bit of like understanding, like there was kind of different situations. Caleb was going against the starters for the Bills, but yeah, I agree. Like he looked really comfortable. There was no pre-snap penalties, which we've been hearing a lot about from training camp. I thought that was really key. My expectations were, okay, go out there and keep everything clean, move the ball, get some points on one of your I was expecting 2 drives, right? So get some points on one of your 2 drives and get out of there safe. And I think he exceeded those expectations. And now we can, I think, let's get a touchdown next time out.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
That's would be the next bar, I think I would say.
19 plays, 2 scoring drives, both field goals. Got away with a bad pass. Could have been a pick six. He could have given up an interception. That would have been a much different story. Roma Dunze played very good defensive back on that poor throw, because that was when he wanted to get back. And then obviously the play that I think underscored all of the hyperbole and everything people are getting excited about. He escaped the pocket, threw downfield, and found Cole Kmet. And I think that was a good sign that arm talent is just something you can't coach, and that arm talent is something that you're not going to be able to ignore, or maybe stop if you're a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, that's one of those plays that, if you as you look at it closer, the way he throws that ball, I mean, it's not easy to make that throw from the position he was in, because he doesn't need to stop his body or his motion at all, and he's able to rip the ball. I think it was like 40 yards in the air on a frozen rope to Cole Kmet, who on the run there. And I was actually really impressed with his scramble on the third down later in the drive, because the way he talked about it post game, the way that he seemingly broke down what was happening with the defense in real time seems impressive. And he was able to see that the Bills were showing something pre-snap, dropped to something different, and steps up in the pocket, recognizes that they're in man coverage, and he can get an easy first down by just taking off because nobody's looking at him.
Yeah, that was a great explanation. I was almost as impressed with the explanation as I was with what he did to react to the way that they were trying to disguise the coverages. They end up in too deep, playing man coverage underneath it, and that's always an invitation, or that's susceptible to a quarterback tucking and running, which Justin Fields did on time and all the time. But I think Caleb Williams, hearing him explain it, was really impressive. The other thing is that I think we tend to, we're used to watching for the last 3 years a quarterback who routinely could get yards and was maybe a run first, pass second type of guy in those types of situations, and he was so good at it in Justin Fields, and that's who he was. But measured against Justin Fields, maybe Caleb Williams isn't that dynamic runner. Measured against most quarterbacks with that arm talent, he is a pretty mobile, dynamic runner. So I think that's the perspective you want to be able to keep. And on plays like that third and long that he converted to a first down with a nice slip and slide, that's when you remember he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. We're measuring him against the rest of the quarterbacks, not just the guy in Justin Fields who was a great running back as a quarterback.
Oh yeah, I mean he is a great athlete. I think that like the scouting on him has always been like he can run the ball really well. He just doesn't want to. He wants to play from the pocket, and he wants to when he scrambles, he's scrambling to throw, right? And that's something that got lost with Justin Fields along the way is he started scrambling to run more than he was scrambling to throw. And hopefully that doesn't like the way that Caleb explains it, I don't think it's going to be an issue because like you would rather he throw the ball, but hey, on third down, you got to go get it, right? So, third down, get the first down however you can.
So Caleb Williams passes the first test, checks the box, however you want to describe it. There's a sense of relief, I think, around Chicago that he looked the part. And now you go against the Bengals, and now you just want to get the preseason over to start the regular season, really. Before we move on from the quarterback position, Adam, what did you think about the Tyson Bagent experience and the way that the backup quarterback situation is looking?
I thought that they didn't move the positioning at all. I think that Tyson's still the backup, and unless we see look, if Brett Rippon had come out and thrown 3 touchdowns again, maybe we might have a conversation. But that I didn't think the backups did anything to move their own positioning. Like when the bottom tier third stringers and fourth stringers were out there, the Bears piled on some points at the end of the game. But after the pick 6 by Micah Baskerville, the game was pretty much over anyway. So I don't think that Tyson looked like Tyson Bagent, and he kept it clean, and ultimately I think that like any conversation about who the backup quarterback is fairly null, and unless Brett Rippon the last 2 preseason games here really shows out.
Bagent's job to lose, and he's done nothing to lose it to this point.
Yeah.
So the offensive line is the other big story on the offense, because I think the weapons, you don't really it's nice to talk about all the different options, but how much time Caleb Williams has and how much room DeAndre Swift has to run depends on the offensive line being whole. It wasn't whole for the first preseason game, getting some possibly encouraging news as we sit here and talk on Tuesday morning. Nate Davis did run with the first offensive unit at practice at Haugh Hall, according to reports. It was only a walkthrough, but it is a good sign. Nate Davis is somebody whose name comes up way too often for offensive linemen. Dave Wanstead was on the Score on Tuesday morning saying maybe the Bears should consider moving on from him, offering him in a trade, just answering the question emphatically because it's becoming somewhat of a nuisance or distraction. Adam, I thought in the first preseason game without Nate Davis in the offensive line, protected Caleb Williams fairly well. There might have been some communication issues on occasion, but they avoided the pre-snap penalties. And overall, I thought they, as a group, without one of their starters, played in a way that gave you a little bit of confidence moving forward.
I agree. I thought that, they Matt Pryor filled in at right guard, and I thought he looked solid. There wasn't a lot of issues for Caleb in the pocket. He was pretty clean, and he I don't think he took a hit, right? So that's the most ideal thing. He almost got himself in trouble when he was running downfield after acting like he was going to block on the play. But I thought the offensive line looked pretty solid against the Bills. And, that's encouraging because, again, the Bills had their starters out there. So it's not like they were facing, a second team unit or anything. So, hey, if they have some real depth and have found a good depth piece with Matt Pryor at right guard, then that's awesome. And I'm really curious. Maybe we need to dig around a little bit. When did they sour on Ja'Chari Carter? Because I thought he looked solid last year when he filled in, and he has not been getting run with these injuries up there. So I don't know if maybe like they just think they can do better. But I liked what I saw out of him last year when he played.
I remember that being the case with Ja'Tari Carter, and I think it was last preseason, but there was a lot of hope invested in him. Even maybe a couple of off seasons ago, our guy, the Bears radio analyst Tom Thayer, would say Ja'Tari Carter was one of the best young offensive linemen to keep an eye on. And all of a sudden, he's gotten passed on the depth chart for whatever reason. So that's a good question. That'd be a good one for maybe Dan to look into with Chris Morgan the next time we have access to Chris Morgan, the offensive line coach. Ja'Tari Carter is a guy they drafted and seemingly have developed. And now you kind of look. I don't think any team's fortunes are going to be dictated by the availability of the right guard. And if they are, then that's really a team that's probably not a playoff caliber team anyway. That said, still an important piece of the puzzle. And you want it all to fit together cohesively before week one. Nate Davis has some time. He has a reputation. Now he's got to overcome that in Chicago, maybe the way he did in Nashville. But I think it's possible. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. It is an important part of the puzzle, but I don't know if it's – I don't know if I agree with Dave Wannstedt necessarily. I do often, but I think in this case, patience might be the way to go and wait and see. And you don't have to make a decision until you have to make a decision.
Yeah, and just for reference, that he's basically untradeable. His cap hit this year is $11.3 million. And for a right guard that's been unavailable, that's not happening.
They're not trading him. Yeah.
Yeah. So and for reference, though, the Bears do have the ability to move on for him at the end of this year with only $2 million of dead cap. So if he doesn't, I mean, obviously the way this is trending, he's going to be gone next year. But if he doesn't get healthy and play, but yeah, the idea of trading him or cutting him is probably not gonna happen. Even though the dead cap for this season, if they cut him, would be about $1 million. But I think the Bears and Ryan Poles have done a really good job of moving on from a lot of that dead money. So I don't think they're going to be they're going to have a good appetite for that. And yeah, I think you need to just keep letting this play out because when he's healthy, he is your best option at right guard. Like he just is. And this does appear to be a legitimate injury, the way that I think Matt Eberflus finally cleared things up a little bit when he spoke last week about what was going on with Nate. So, and he called him week to week. It's a good sign that he's back out there when they're in shells, but he's been out there when they've been in shells the last couple weeks. So the real test is going to be for when they're in full pads against the Bengals. And just another quick note, some like good news I don't report from Brad Biggs from practice is they're practicing like right now as we're recording this podcast. Montez Sweat and Kyler Gordon are also back at practice today.
Big signs, good signs. You're right. That's a positive because Kyler Gordon's days were starting to mount days into weeks.
They were.
You can't really, you don't want to lose him. Last thought on the Nate Davis situation before we move on to some of the other defensive issues. I feel like when they invested in Matt Eberflus to come back another year, I was okay with that. They did it for a reason. Maybe we don't need to relitigate that. But when they did that, they said that they believed in his ability to create a culture that was conducive to winning. If you really believe in your head coach and his coaching staff, you will trust them to figure this out. Attrition is going to be real on the offensive line. You're going to need depth. Nate Davis might be a pain in the neck right now. He might be a headache and a nuisance, but you might need a guy like that to not only start but stay healthy, or to carry your right side of the line if Darnell Wright misses 3 games with whatever, and somebody else needs to know the offense. So these are big issues in training camp. They're preseason, so they're magnified. You just got to be patient and let your coaching staff do its job to kind of absorb all of these things and still keep moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. Like Nate Davis is going to be on the team this season unless something really weird or catastrophic happens. Because like you're saying there, okay, let's say they decide he's not going to be your starting right guard, then he becomes a really good backup right guard. So that's still something good to have. And this is a team that's planning to win now. Look, 2-3 years ago, they might have said, okay, we're not going to deal with this. Let's just move on. We're not going to be good anyway. But they're
Right.
trying to be this is win time now. Like, they're not messing around anymore. So having good depth pieces on the offensive line is extremely important, because it's extremely rare for your entire offensive line to play every single game during the NFL season, especially with a 17 game season now.
Let's move back to Saturday. Two intriguing young players. I guess you can still call one of them young, but two intriguing role players on this team emerged on either side of the ball. I'm going to start with defense, but then we'll get to the offensive one. Adam, I thought Austin Booker flashed. This is what you're waiting to see as a Bears fan. I don't know if I want to get too carried away. Again, that's the preseason exercise and discipline. But 2.5 sacks, and as active as he was, you just know why, as Dan has described, the Bears – certain Bears personnel have this kind of a sly grin on their face when Austin Booker's name comes up, because they kind of know something. And on Saturday against the Bills, he looked like he's learning the NFL job and game really very well, very quickly. That's the kind of speed and quickness and burst that really you can't coach, and it's very, very difficult to combat from an offensive line perspective.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely has the things that you can't teach. And that's really good, and it's good job on scouting by the Bears to find this guy, because although I know that they were talking about him, like if he had gone back for another season in college, he probably would have gotten himself up to as high as a second round draft pick. So the talent is undeniable, but this is still a 5th round pick who's really raw, who hasn't played the position a ton, and for him to be showing these kind of flashes in preseason already is a really good sign. Now, like, there's still a long way to go for him, I think, because he is so raw, and he does need to put on some muscle, which isn't going to happen this year. It's so hard for these rookies to put on real muscle when they're going from the scouting combine to the draft to mini camp to a little bit of time off, and now they're in training camp. So that's something that they're going to have to work on next year. But as far as just the quick burst and having the kind of moves that are tough to defend, that's great to see. And for a team that, like, they really need to find who that guy is opposite of Montez Sweat. I know that DeMarcus Walker is going to be he's going to be the starter,
pick, right?
Yeah, he's going to do a little bit of everything for you, but they need that dynamic guy that's going to come in and at least have teams glancing their eye opposite of Montez Sweat. That, no matter what, Sweat's going to get most of the attention. He's going to get most of the game planning. But you need somebody on the other end to be like, hey, don't forget that this guy's over here. Or when they flip sides, don't forget where he's at.
You do. You need a compliment. You need somebody to distract and to be accounted for. I want to get to an intriguing possibility on that question before we end the podcast. But I want to stay with the guys who flashed on Saturday. The other guy, young player on the offensive side of the ball for me that caught my attention, and I almost cringe before I say this because I know what the reaction will be out in podcast land. Velus Jones, to me, maybe it's only me, Velus Jones to me looks like somebody whose career is salvageable. And when he beat the defensive back to the pylon, it just reminded everybody, again, what can't you coach? What can't you account for? It's speed. Speed kills. And I think when you have it, as much as Velus Jones has it, some of the other things that he's working on, some of the other sins, if you will, can be forgiven more easily if you have that element out of the backfield. And this is a creative, enterprising project for the Bears. I give them credit for trying. If it's just to showcase him for a deal, okay, fine. Get a return on your investment. He was a 3rd-round draft pick. You got to try to maximize that. I like the way they're trying to maximize that. Maybe that's as far as I want to go right now after the first game, because I know people are like, oh, did you see the way he let the kickoff go through? Okay, I know. But he is worth trying to salvage when you have the speed element that not everybody has. I like what I saw on Saturday.
I do. I think that, it's probably about time they tried him out a little bit at running back, and maybe their depth at wide receiver previous to this season demanded that he play wide receiver, but they have a lot of depth there now. So they don't have to worry about who their number 4 or 5 wide receiver is. the running back room is a little crowded, but I do like that they're finally trying this because, like you're saying, the speed has never been in question. The speed and how dynamic he is with the ball when it gets in his hands has not been the question. It's all the other little things, that he's been fired entirely from fielding punts, and he did muff a kickoff
Yep.
against the Bills. Although, like, honestly, I'm not as worried about that. He's been fairly clean fielding kickoffs, so I'm not that concerned about that one. But anyway, back to the running back thing. Look, if they found a space for him to be there, then that's awesome because this was the first offensive player that Ryan Poles took in the draft. So to this point, it's been a big miss. and so they're going to do everything they can to try and get him on the field and make him salvageable because he's still really cheap. So, he's probably not going to get cut, but he's got to find a role because right now his role is kick returner. And with this new kick return rule, he has more value, right? But you still need to do a little bit of the other things. And so you got to find a space for him on offense.
And I think that I give him credit for trying to be creative. You could envision him being on the field and third down as a running back, and then getting a swing pass and using the speed to get the first down or a draw play. I don't know. I think I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I do like the possibility that I saw on a team that is trying to be creative offensively, and that's a good nod to Shane Waldron. So keep an eye on Velus Jones. On the other end of the spectrum, Adam, I do wonder. And I didn't really think about this again. If you want to listen to the Dave Wanstead interview on the Mully and Haugh show, Marshall Harris and Mark Grody sat in on Tuesday. It's worth listening to because he mentioned the possibility of Mercedes Lewis not making this football team. And that's the first I really had considered. I thought Mercedes Lewis might be a lock, but if you have somebody else that is emerging up and coming tight end, I guess I want to ask Dan when he comes back. I'm curious to get your opinion on it because I feel like they brought Mercedes Lewis back for a reason. That was stability. That was to help with the pass protection. And that was to just be a guiding force in the locker room as well. Even at 40 years old, I think he's worth keeping.
Yeah, that's interesting. Again, I understand that this team has more depth than it did in the past, and there's actual competition at a lot of positions now, like real NFL competition, not we hope this guy turns into something competition. But I think that, I'm with you, David. I think that Mercedes Lewis was brought in to be, he's essentially a third tackle when he's on the field. So he's brought in to be a run blocker. He's brought in to be a pass blocker. Maybe once a year, like they did last year, they'll sneak him out on a pass, on a route and try to get him a touchdown. But I think that his role is pretty solidified. Like I would be stunned if they decide that he's not, after they went out and signed him the way that, like, they didn't have to bring him back.
Right.
This isn't a guy that they signed out of desperation. They chose to go out and seek his services for another season. And I think that he's going to play a key role in the run game and occasionally in pass protection. And he's a really good leader for this team to have. Like he's seen a lot.
That matters.
A lot.
And a team that values character, leadership matters.
And guy played with Aaron Rodgers. He's been on some really successful teams. Like he's important to have in the locker room. And, maybe after this season, I'd be stunned if he doesn't retire after this season, but I thought he would retire after last year. So yeah, I don't think his role is at risk. It's interesting that Wani would bring that up though. I don't think he would speculate wildly. So
I don't either. He's not that kind of guy. He doesn't speculate wildly about much. But let's speculate wildly on the next topic before we get out of here. Haason Reddick still has yet to report to Jets camp. He's a pass rusher who has controlled the Super Bowl. He is a guy that is as disruptive as they come. The Jets got him for a reason. He has spent one day as a New York Jet the day he signed his contract. It was coincidentally April 1st. Now, Haason Reddick is technically a holdout unless something changes by the time we tape this and drop it. But if he is there for the taking, and Joe Douglas, the general manager for the Jets, says he's not trading him. But I seem to remember the Raiders general manager executives saying, Reggie McKenzie saying, I think it was, he wasn't trading Khalil Mack back in 2018, a couple weeks before they traded Khalil Mack. I remember other general managers saying, going way back, I think I heard that reference today, Rick Spielman in 2013 said declaratively he was not trading Percy Harvin before the Vikings traded Percy Harvin. General managers are going to say that to hold their ground. Just curious, the thought of Haason Reddick in a Bears uniform changes expectations even more than they are now. Like, you think they're crazy now? You sign a pass rusher that's commensurate with Montez Sweat on the other side of Montez Sweat. All of a sudden, you're talking about the Bears being, up there with the Lions and the Packers in the NFC North. That would be a high price, Adam.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's Haason Reddick for sale, if it's an auction, I think that Ryan Poles has got to pick up the phone and make a bid.
I think that, it's interesting. Like, when I saw this cross yesterday, I understand why people start speculating. Hey, I agree that the Bears should kick the tires on it. Like, make a phone call, see what the price is. I don't necessarily think they need to break the bank to go get him. And maybe the price will be too high. Now, the Bears do have, I don't think they should be giving up a first-round pick for him. They do have 2 second-round picks. Maybe one of those and a later pick gets you Haason Reddick. But the other thing is you have to consider, he wants a new contract, and you're going to have to pay the man. And I understand that, you do want to, most of your money in the NFL these days is going to on defense, going to your corners and your edge rushers, right? So that it'd be fine to go ahead and pay another defensive end. But there's other guys coming up they're going to have to pay too. And so this is a good problem that they're going to have to start having, which is they have to start thinking about, okay, do we want to go out and pay Haason Reddick now, or do we want to worry about paying, Keenan Allen next year? I don't know necessarily. I'm kind of in the camp that he's not going to be back, but they're going to have to start doing this balance sheet of how to spend their cap money. It's a good problem to have that good teams have. Right. However, and it's a problem they haven't had recently. Like last year, they could just say, all right, who do we want? And they can sign whoever they want. And it was kind of the case this year. But I think that, I think there's a little bit more of a risk now, and I don't necessarily want them to go out and break the bank for Haason Reddick right now.
Fair enough.
I think if this was a year ago, I'd say absolutely go get him. But right now, I don't think they're so desperate. Or maybe even if this was next season and they know that Caleb Williams has shown something and they're thinking Super Bowl, then go. That I would say go all in. But I don't know if they're quite there yet.
Okay, I'm on the board, because we have to have a conversation about it. And I don't want to be in a position where with Khalil Mack a couple weeks before that happened, we were poo-pooing it and okay, that's unlikely. Right now on the record, it's a possibility. It's speculation. It's pure speculation. But the big if for me is if there is a possibility to make a deal, I think a 3rd or 4th round draft pick would be worth giving up for a defensive player that would change your profile to that degree. And we won't address it again until it becomes more of a news issue, if it continues to linger. He could report within hours to the Jets camp, because eventually he's going to have to, or else he's going to face some real hefty fines. But it's just a story worth monitoring, much like the Khalil Mack was back in 2018 in mid-August, and we didn't think anything was going to happen. And then Labor Day weekend, everything changed.
Yeah, and look, that was an insane. I'm with you. I never thought that. Okay, there's no way they ever go make that move.
Right.
But I think that look, if it costs you a 3rd or 4th round pick, okay, and then look, there's no question that he's good. There's no question that he would be an upgrade. I would welcome it if it happened. I don't know if I'm necessarily in the camp of go do it right now. And so
just Sports Talk Radio.
Yeah, exactly. It is. It's a great topic for Bears podcast as well. And also, what can the Jets be normal for 5 minutes?
No, I know.
It's every year with them. Even before they got Aaron Rodgers, every year they have something weird happening. So it's just
they're the perfect
be normal
team
for 5 minutes.
Yeah, but they're the perfect team to be overcovered on ESPN, because that's all they're going to talk about on ESPN constantly is the Jets and all their dysfunction. Okay, so that's a wrap of the first preseason game, and the week after, the couple days afterward, the aftermath of the second preseason game, the first one that Caleb Williams played in. So to me, that's the one that matters the most. The Bengals practices start this week. They're going to practice once against the Bengals and then play them Saturday at Soldier Field. Not sure yet if Caleb Williams will play. It seems to be up in the air. It's a good debate. They'll have good action against the Bengals in the practice time. Matt Eberflus likes this kind of opportunity. We'll be back to talk about what we see and what happened at those practices. Adam, anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think that's all I got for this week. Just for the record, I think they should play Caleb no matter what.
I do too.
Against
Don't
the
you
Bengals.
think that? I mean, I think
Yeah.
you want to keep the momentum going. I think that if you don't play him, you raise some questions. You create a little bit of rust. He liked playing. He even had the date the last time he played in competition, November 18th for USC. You keep the momentum going, even if it's just as little as 19 plays.
Yeah, I just think, I understood why they didn't play Justin Fields after they had those practices against the Colts last year. He was a little more, he's more veteran though. Like, I think Caleb needs the experience, even if you end up going against the Bengals twos. If that's the case, then okay, go ahead and let him have 2 great drives.
I think
ideally.
that's a great idea. I would do the same thing, and it'll be fun when they make a decision, when they have practice. We'll with the Bengals. I think Dan will be back and we'll be able to talk about it and break it down. So for Dan Wiederer, who is off today, Adam Studzinski, our producer from The Score, I'm David Haugh. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Download, listen, and subscribe. Give us some feedback, and you can watch us on 670 Scores YouTube page. Thanks for listening and watching. We'll talk to you next time.
Great talk. See you out there.